Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
All right, we are at verse 6, chapter 4, verse 6. All right, so now, after talking about all of the bad stuff, what the people did and so forth and so on, now we're going to lay out in this section the consequences of their religious hypocrisy. Okay, remember, these are the people who would go to the various shrines, the temples, and think that they can buy their way into God's favor, ignoring how they act as human beings vis-a-vis other human beings. Okay, so now we're going to see what is it that God is going to do. And the prophet right away, here he comes, all guns firing. So this is the thing, what's God going to do? V'gam ani natati lachem nikyon shinayim b'chol areichem v'choser lechem b'chol makomotechem. All right? I'm going to give you cleanness of teeth in all of your cities and a lack of lechem, which probably means, as the translation says, food, in all of your settlements. Then it ends, V'lo shavtem adai umadonai. But you did not return to me, said God. I did this, I punished you. You got a bad punishment. But it didn't make any difference. You still stuck to your ways, which are not my ways, says God. Okay? Now,
sorry.
I find that to be a very interesting term. It's a metaphor for hunger, right? This whole thing talks about hunger, right? Famine.
Oh, okay.
That's what this is talking about, right?
You're not talking about the hygienist that comes to the door. No, I'm just making a stupid joke.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Nikyon Shinayim, clean teeth, right? It's interesting because on the one hand, I don't know how the ancients viewed it by today's standards. That's great to have clean teeth, right?
Not if it means you're never get anything stuck in them.
That's the point. But I'm just saying, and I'm wondering how they dealt with this, if this is an ironic, if he intentionally chooses an ironic statement to use for famine, clean teeth, which, sounds very hygienic. And my only point is I never looked up, I don't know where dental care in the biblical times. So I don't know, but it's very vivid, as a way, what you said, Tybal, about, nothing stuck in between them. Yes, that's exactly the point. And choser lechem in all of your places, right? And so,
Rabbi, it's interesting that the image of teeth, shinei banim tikena.
Yes.
Oh, here is
yes. Avot asu boker.
Boser.
Yeah.
Shinei banim tikena.
Exactly.
So the concept of teeth is somehow.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's because the unripe grapes are, they're bitter, right? And you pucker, and that leaves that feeling in your mouth. So they were aware again of, how the teeth operate. There's no question. Right. That's a good point, Ellie. Thank you. Very good. Yeah. But it's the point here, though, is it's real. There it is. So he brought famine, right? And you can see here again, the second and third portions of clauses. Nikyon shinayim b'chol areichem, choser lechem b'chol makomotechem. All right, so you have those. It's four words and four words. Okay, and that's a poetic structure. It's got parallelism, right? It's parallelism. It's what we used to call complementary, or it's an additional adding on parallelism. So that, again, these little poetic structures are his prophecies and his words are dotted with these things. And again, my question is this the way he thought, how he spoke? And was that part of the way these prophets presented themselves? Because many prophets have these elements in their prophecies. Okay? But again, the conclusion, you did not turn back to me. And this is going to be the first of a whole series of you did not turn back to me. Okay, it's going to go on now. We'll go to the next one, verse 7. But now he goes continuing, and verse 7 I think should really be 7 and 8 should be sort of linked together. It's one of those two verses that. Because, Vigam and I also, right? Vigam anochi manati mikem et hageshem ba'od shlosha chodashim lakatzir, right? I held back from you the rain 3 months before the harvest. V'himtarti al ir achat lo amtir. And I caused rain to fall on one city, but in another city I did not. Chelka achat timater, one part of a city will get rain. V'chelka asher lo tamtir alea tibash, and the part that will not get rain, it'll get dry. So God is basically saying, I'm playing games with the rain. I'm having a good time, but you guys are suffering, right? Now, what is this thing 3 months before the harvest? So the harvest, if this is the first harvest, is the barley harvest in April, let's say, right, in the spring. Okay, so 3 months before, and suddenly there's no rain. What does it mean?
No harvest.
Why?
No rain, because they didn't get the rain in order to grow.
Right. And the point is, it is a very frustrating thing because they worked hard during the first part of that season to get to that point. And now they need these late rains. And this is something that's going to pop up again in another way soon. This is the second rain that they need in order to complete the process of growing the fruits or vegetables to the point where they can be harvested. And so in a sense, they worked and worked. They're very happy 3 months before. This is great, right? And then suddenly, boom, the faucet is turned off and everything shrivels up. So it's really God's playing with them in a sense. And I remember this was like a number of years ago. We had great rain here in LA through December, and then came January, it stopped. And by the time summer came, we were in pretty bad shape. I'm just, talking about what happened with the reservoirs. Drying had begun to happen already in the forested areas. And everybody thought this is going to be, in fact, they were even predicting, this is great. We're off to a great start. The mountains had a lot of snow, up in the up north, looked very good, but suddenly it all stopped. And I mean, I can remember the opposite, where you got drought going into March, and suddenly March, you have in 1 month that year, this is a number of years ago, you had enough rain for the whole season and more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's crazy. The flooding was horrific.
Oh, yeah.
All coming down at one time. In fact, I remember in Bethel, one of those years, the mirror room downstairs, the old mirror room, was flooded because the water was seeping up from underground.
Oh, no.
The water table underneath was overflowing, and the manhole covers were popping off the manholes on La Cienega Boulevard.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, I mean it was well what they did that mobilized people and the city, and eventually they did all of that work on Crescent Heights, I believe. They added more underground sewage, water, those big huge pipes that carry the water away to reduce that problem, and it went away. Okay, but they were able to deal with that anyhow. But yes, I mean, the fickleness of the rain here, which it's a natural phenomenon, right, is now ascribed to God, and it's a form of the punishment. And by the way, I can tell you, I see your hand, Tybal, just a second. I can tell you from personal experience, when I was a kid years ago, we had a summer thunderstorm, which do happen here occasionally. And I was standing on my side. This is no joke. On my side of the street, it was raining. Across the street, it wasn't.
Whoa.
Because the rain cloud literally stopped right there. And then we're sitting there, and there, the sun is over there.
Oh, that's too funny.
It was the craziest thing, but again, that's weather. But you see, that's what he's doing here. He's taking all these anomalies in weather, which happen more often than we probably realize. But now this is an indication that God is really sending a message out. I control the rain. And if you don't listen, I can turn it on and off at my will. But, as we will see in a moment, didn't work. All right. Yeah, Tybal.
So at least the explanations that seem to me to have some substance in them about theodicy have to do with what I'm going to say propinquity, that sometimes the evil person and the good person live next to each other and the rain just is where you are. I don't know if that's a very modern take on theodicy, but the whole V'ahavta in the rain, do you think that in this text that we're supposed to be thinking about the question of evil and good?
No,
I'm not sure I asked that well enough.
You understand? No, but remember, he's not looking at this in terms of every single person. He's talking about in general the nature of the society. That's what this is about. And unfortunately, when you have, if you've got a crazy person who, for whatever reason, starts a fire, and 20 people die because of that fire, and they're innocent people, okay? All right? The point is the impact of, that's unfortunately how communities operate. If you got some bad apples, it can cause the whole group to get sick, right? And why should that be? But that's the way it is. So the point here is what he's saying, remember, keep this in context. The whole society here is corrupt. This is the point he's trying to make. At least, and again, the question is, he's really angry at the upperclassmen, that's the wrong term, the upper class people who have all this money but do all kinds of bad things to get it, according to him and according to what God is saying. So the point is, when these things happen, do innocent people get stuck? Yes. That's the nature of what happens when communities go bad. Okay. And that's the way it is. But his perspective is he's talking about, so basically what he is saying is the evil people who have a lot of say as to how these communities operate are creating a problem not only for themselves, but for everybody. The problem, of course, is that the people who caused it don't care. They only care about themselves. And the result is going to be, eventually, the Assyrian victory where people were taken out of the country. Now, it's very likely in these situations that a lot of the people who were taken away were the rich because they have the most power. You want to get them out of there and spread them around where they can't earn anything, where they're going to be paupers. But the point is, inevitably, when these things happen, they take soldiers out. And soldiers are not necessarily wealthy people, and they're just acting, at the command of their leaders. And they're fighting the war to protect all of these wealthy people, and they're going to be sent away also. And they're not necessarily rich people; they're probably poorer people.
Actually, Rabbi, I'm going to make a suggestion that they didn't necessarily want to impoverish the wealthy in moving them, in transplanting them. Rather, they wanted to take a group of people with a necessary mix of skills that then, this is especially true of the Assyrians, they would conquer an area. There would be an area that wasn't terribly heavily populated or well developed. And then they would take a group that were experienced in developing civilization, in developing society and all the infrastructure of society, and put them there with the intention that they would build the place up. And thereby, yes, they're going to profit from it, but they're not going to be a threat to their empire. They're actually going to be taxpayers to their empire.
No,
they wanted them to make money.
Yes, right. I read that, and that's a valid point.
That's very.
Well, I don't know who wrote it, but it's just common sense to me.
Yeah, but I think the point though is that it depends upon. A lot of this depends upon the nature of the individual people the skills, let's put it that way. If you have a skilled person is not necessarily a rich person, and a rich person is not necessarily skilled. If the rich person has gotten rich due to crime, which is what Amos was saying, defrauding the poor and things like that, right? But they have money, and you take away their money. I'm speaking from Amos's perspective, okay? I think you're right, by the way, that people who have skills, and if they can be discerned by in the process of transporting them, yes, they're sent to places where their skills can be used. And it could be a positive contribution. At the same time, you're taking them out of their country, so they cannot pose a political problem.
Well, I have another perspective here, and according to the BAR, they also wanted to destroy the culture and society
yes.
of the place and replace it with their own culture and society. This has happened in numerous times throughout history.
Yes.
And why, if you say that it's just that they wanted their people with skills, they would, if that was the only reason, I'm sure there were people with skills that were in those places already. The society
not necessarily. I'm talking about lightly populated areas.
Yeah, what AJ is saying is they want to take what you're right. In the sense, you're both right. Okay. How about that? I agree with both of you.
But that's a tradition, right?
Yes, that's right. Maybe I'll become a rabbi. I agree with both of you. Now, the point being, number one, yes, they do want to transport their culture because that gives them another toehold in another location.
Exactly.
But we know that over time, if this works, that they will be comfortable neighbors.
Right.
They'll think alike. Sure. Okay. It's like the same. Yes, exactly. But on the other hand, if you take skilled people, that doesn't necessarily mean wealthy people. Wealthy people, if you take them out of one city and you plunk them in, let's say in Damascus, Damascus, right, another city, they may be able to become wealthy again. But they didn't do that. They would send them out to places where they would just hopefully be totally negated. That's one thing. They don't want their power because the power, there's no guarantee. How do you trust them? But the point is that if you're a skilled person and you want to create a new area in an undeveloped part of your empire, and you figure out, okay, this guy is a good metal person. He knows how to work with metals. And we always need shields for our armies. And this is an area out here where we know there's a lot of iron ore. We just don't have people. And we have people out there who can mine it. Or they'll just take, let's say, soldiers who are strong, take them over there and take away their weapons and make them miners of the ore. Okay? And over there in another place, they have the miners, but they don't have the men to use the ore to create the metal objects that they want. So they'll take these people. So, I mean, they're not, in a sense, there are multiple functions in their system.
I just want to say the biblical, the BAR, one sentence here says the Syrian annals specify that 27,290 captives were deported from Samaria.
Yeah.
And it refers to the region of Samaria and not
just the city. The city may be less than
right. The city itself might have had 1,000. So, I mean, that's a lot more than rich people. It's a lot of population.
A mixed population. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's right. Yes, I didn't say it's only rich people.
Right.
It's all kinds. But I think what AJ is saying is numbers of them could be skilled people.
Could be.
Yeah. No. I don't think these are all,
That's a supposition.
You got a whole, and I don't know if these people who wrote these articles, it's conjecture, or if they actually have lists of people who were brought, let's say, from the area of Samaria and plunked down in different locations in the north, north of Eretz Israel into some area. Okay, if they have a register of Chaim and Moshe and this guy came and they are whatever they are, and we now have them working over there. That type of stuff. I don't know that we have that.
That's what I'm saying. Is that's where's the archaeology to where
I don't think that there are instances. I mean, I've read. Let me put it this way. There is conjecture with archaeology.
Well, yeah.
Because you get a hint of what's going on, but you don't know the proportions of it very often. And I mean, for example, the fact that they could say 27,000 people it can't be it just can't be one city.
Of course, that's what it says. It has to be the surroundings of this.
Yes, because you can guess a population of a city just from looking at it. If you're an archaeologist, you can go to the ruin, you can see how many homes there are standing. If there are ample numbers of homes, you can figure out how big they were, how dense it was, and so forth and so on. You can come up with a reasonable estimate. But on the other hand, you got people like Josephus, who say that, when the Romans created the siege around Jerusalem after Pesach, there were 600,000 Jews locked in Jerusalem. That's impossible. I mean, an archaeologist will tell you it is physically impossible.
Yeah, it sounds
it's too small. We're talking about the walled city. I'm not talking about greater Jerusalem of today, right?
Sounds true.
So the numbers from the sources from the time, the historians, the people of the times interpreting these things, you can't trust them. You get a sense of the gross situation that's going on. Okay, I mean it's the same thing. Like he got that number from the Exodus, right? 603,550. That's adult males over the age of 20. Okay, now how many people does that mean per family? Okay, and we have, according to the traditions, these were people who were married with kids. I don't know.
Let me understand, Rabbi. I mean, didn't the Babylonians, the Romans, etc., conquered or try to conquer Judea? They did conquer Samaria and Judea because it was a threat to their empire in some sense, not because of because of maybe security of their empire.
I don't know it was as much as threats, because the numbers of Eretz Yisrael population were not that big. But hold on. The threat, what I would suggest is, Eretz Yisrael was a major land bridge between the north and the south, between the two major centers, Mesopotamia and Egypt. And we know, for example, the best example of this is the Persians. The Persians used Jews in Egypt to keep the Egyptians at bay in their own country. We've talked about this before. In Aswan, Svene, right? Elephantine, it's called. In the southern part, in Upper Egypt, Nile area, there was a fortress. I'm talking in the 5th century BCE, a fortress. Probably the personnel were Jews, Israelites, who fled with Jeremiah and went to Egypt. We know that that's what Jeremiah did. He writes that in his book. And there were Jews there, and that became the kernel of a Jewish population in Egypt that flourished later on. But in these early years, we're talking 100 years or so after the fall of Jerusalem, right? Give or take 100, 120, 130 years later, these people or their children or grandchildren who were raised as Israelites in Egypt are now manning a fortress in the southern part of the country, in a strategic location. And the Persians, but they report to the Persians, because the Persians controlled parts of Egypt at that time. All right? But it was important for them. They always had an eye on Egypt because it's in the south. It's the competition, the big time competition. All these areas, the Israelites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, all these different people were drops in the bucket. Except there's one point, though. They were still very, very interested in maintaining stability. In the 5th century also, Jerusalem was upgraded to a Persian military and political center. That's why they could build new walls around the city, repair the walls, make them complete, which they couldn't do before. And Nehemiah, who comes in as governor from Babylonia at the behest of the king of Persia, he comes with a mandate. He is the political representative of the Persian government for the people of Yahud, Judah. Okay? And he's working on behalf of the Persian government. He's a Jew. And Nehemiah was his religious authority, shall we say. And it says in the book of Nehemiah that same king gave a mandate that the law of the Torah is the law of Persia for the Jews. It's not just the law of God. It's the law of the king of Persia.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, so they upgraded the city because it is on the south, right?
Right.
On that road. It's from it now. That's not on the road, but the fact is, it's a fortress, and you can get down. The two roads were Derech Hayam, right, and the Jordan River, right?
Right.
The coastal road, and the Jordan River. There's a road that went up the Rift. All right, those were the two main north-south roads. And if you think where Jerusalem is, It's where it is. Now, it's a schlep to get up there, but it's very easy to come down.
It's always
So,
easier to come down.
I still don't understand. So why did the Babylonian destroy Jerusalem instead of...
But the Persians came back. Remember, the Persians are after the Babylonians.
No, but I'm talking about the Babylonian. Why did they destroy Jerusalem and not adopted it like the Persian, as an example?
Well, they had different countries had different policies. Okay, it's the same thing. I mean, the Babylonians did not disperse captured people the way the Assyrians did. In fact, the Babylonians actually, after the second generation up there, the king Jehoiachin, who was the king who was brought into exile in 597 in the first situation of conquest of Jerusalem, the beginning of the process before the temple was destroyed, but that was the first taking of the city. And then Tzidkiyahu, who ruled afterwards, he was supposed to be a puppet, but he didn't like it, so he tried to do nasty things. They killed him. But Jehoiachin was taken hostage. And I don't know how long, nobody knows the exact timing of these things, but soon afterwards, this is a guy who was taken out of prison, and he lived in the royal palace of the king of Babylonia as a guest of the king. So he was shown the dignity of being a king. And the fact is, it was under the Babylonians, before the Persians took over, that you hear stories like Ezekiel with his prophecies and Jews gathering around him, right? And all these things. So the Babylonians were more laissez-faire about these things. That was their approach. Okay? Yeah, I mean, so every empire had different policies. Some of them worked to the favor of the Jews, and some of them didn't. The Assyrians were much more brutal. I mean, the Babylonians, of course, could be brutal. The Persians could be brutal in their wars. But this is the way it was. I mean, but the fact is, we shouldn't view it. I mean, is the presence of Israel, of the Jews there, with the exception of the period of the Maccabean kingdom, which allowed a certain expansion of boundaries. What came to be called Judea. In Persian, in Aramaic, it was Yahud. And the Jews were Yahudim, which in Hebrew became Yehudim. In fact, you can say Jews after they come back from Babylonia. You can call them Jews, because that was the name ultimately. The Jeremiah uses that term even. Jeremiah already is using that word. So, I mean, but it was a tiny, tiny country. It wasn't. It comes nowhere near the size of the country as it was when Amos was giving his tirades. Okay, remember, this is at the time of Jeroboam II, when in certain locations the country reached some of its largest holdings, because he was a king who was around for a long time, and he was able to conquer areas from those other countries that had been thorns in the side. When he finished, when he died, and then eventually the Assyrians began to shake things up, the whole thing fell apart. So, it up and down. But the point is, it was a tiny country, and that was the reality. It grew. I mean, obviously the population grew. There's no question. And, as bad as things were under the Romans after they took over, it was a corrupt government. But in a sense, the numbers of the population of Eretz Israel prior to 70 had grown. I can't tell you how many people. Nobody knows for sure. But it wasn't huge, but it was substantial. Okay, and after the first war, it sort of stabilized for a while. But after Bar Kokhba, I mean, nobody knows for sure the exact proportions. Some scholars say that the population diminished by 2/3. I mean, remember, where were they living? That community was in the Galil. The southern part of the country was probably Judenrein. Jerusalem was off. They couldn't go into Jerusalem. That was after Hadrian. Okay, it was horrific, and that's when Babylonia really began to. The Jewish community in Babel, which was still under the rule of the Persians, not the Romans, it was starting to thrive, and that continued for decades, and under the Persians and then under the Muslims, and to the point where, at one point, the Jewish community of Baghdad was the largest Jewish community in the world. That was before Spain, right? It switched at a certain point in time. There was a big population shift in the Middle Ages into Southern Europe. So, I mean, yeah. All right, we're really off track here. Sorry. All right.
Well, that's very interesting.
So God is playing games with the weather, right? Remember that there were two rains.
Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah.
You may not know the answer, but I want to find out if you do. So around the year 1000, you see the shift. Is actually prior to 1000, a shift from Babel to the Iberian Peninsula. But was that related to a warming period?
To a what?
A global warming period.
I have no idea. No, what happened? I don't know. I can't answer that.
It's associated with a warming period.
A warming period, a period of global warming. I can't answer that. What I studied was that in you had a shift that took place in the 9th century in Europe, and in the 10th century in particular, with the rise in Italy and southern France of merchants.
Mm-hmm.
And this was done with the support of the kings. Okay, the same way, for example, that Charlemagne invited Jews to come in and open up mercantile centers in the rivers of his empire, so to speak. And that continued in the 10th century as well. It was a process of a growth of a strength of leadership in Europe and a growth in its economy. And what happened, that was simultaneous with a weakening of the Islamic control out of Baghdad. And there was a general simultaneously, there was a shift. People wanted to get away from the more crowded areas, and so they moved west to other areas that were more open. All right, and it spread economy, it spread wealth, and that whole process sucked the wealth out of Babel, and so the Jews moved with everybody else. And so their numbers in Morocco, in North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, they begin to grow. Eretz Israel was not seemingly not really touched, or it was poor. It remained very poor. But these other locations that had vibrant economies, they were growing, and obviously Spain was a beneficiary of that. Now, whether that had to do with weather, I don't know. But remember, the Muslim empire was not necessarily, the Muslims were not farmers, right? They were merchants, and they lived off of that kind of an economy. And so when the Christians began to take over areas of the Mediterranean, and they had their own navies, right? They had money. They could build ships. They could build, military ships. And so they cracked the monopoly that the Muslims had over the Mediterranean. And that was a major factor in the decline of those centers in the Arab world and the shift in hence the shift in population. Okay? That's the best that I know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So just to finish this up. So they're talking about the rain that falls in winter, in midwinter, right? the Malkosh reign. It's called. You have Yoreh and the Malkosh. They're mentioned in the Torah. The Yoreh and the Malkosh. The Yoreh is in the fall, right? And the Malkosh is in the winter. And the Yoreh fell, but the Malkosh did not, because God turned it off. Okay? So this is what he's talking about. And so the crops failed. All right, but now he's continuing. So, all right, and that, by the way, it may be that the reference to the famine in verse 7, this is now the cause of that famine. It's not clear. I would have put verse 7 at the end, okay, or in between 7 and 8, okay? I would have just changed the order. But here, this is something else now, a result. Now, so that's, excuse me, the issue of the katsir, the harvesting, right? That reference is for the farmers. And then there's a reference to the cities, okay? So now the city reference continues on because, look what it says, verse 8. V'na'u shtayim shalosh arim el ir achat lishtot mayim v'lo yisba'u v'lo sheftam adai na'um Adonai. So so 2 or 3 towns would move to another town, would move together to one city to drink water, and they couldn't be satisfied. There wasn't enough water. So the point is, it hits the farmers and it hits the cities. But again, you did not return to me. You didn't do tshuva, says God. Okay, now we move on to verse 9. Now is a big shift. And listen to these things and see what it reminds you of. This is verse 9. Hiketi etchem b'shidafon u'b'yerakon. Harbot ganotechem v'charmechem v'teinechem v'zeitechem yochal hagazam. V'lo shavtem adayin num Adonai. I hit you with shidafon, okay, with blight, which is a plant disease, and mildew, and repeatedly, he says harbot. It means many, but he's interpreting this as a measurement of time. It could be, but harbot means harbe, right? Of your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and olive trees were devoured by gazam, locusts. But you still didn't come back to me. So what is this starting to sound like?
10 Commandments and the 10 plagues.
What?
The curses. I think it's the curses.
No, the 10 plagues.
The curses, yes, the curses that you find at the end of Deuteronomy and Leviticus. But what else?
10 plagues.
Huh? I can't hear you.
10 plagues.
10 plagues.
The 10 plagues, yes. It sounds like Egypt.
Right? What else, though, is interesting? It's 2 of the big 3 of the 7 species that we use to make things sacred. Vineyards and olive trees, but it's not the grain for the bread.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's right.
But so fig, maybe, I don't know, is there an association fig with the Garden of Eden? So 2 of the big 3 for making things sacred. I don't know. Fig is an interesting one to choose out of. We're not going to do the big 3, as I'm calling them, from the 7 species. I understand that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm thinking that maybe vineyards, it's gardens and vineyards, and fig trees and olive trees. These are, well, they're all, grapes, figs, and olives. Yeah, those are 3 of the 7 varieties. Correct. And trees, I can understand because they are big, and suddenly they become naked. But at the same time, gardens, it could be a garden It's beautiful. It's green. Don't know if it has fruits in it or not. The interesting thing is, you're right. It doesn't say anything about grains, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I can't answer it. Don't know. On the other hand, wine, figs, and olives were, again, he's focusing. Are those things that a wealthy person is more prone to eat than a poor person? I don't know.
I would think pomegranates, even then, would be more for the wealthy.
Well, pomegranates aren't mentioned, though.
No, but when you're saying wealthy, and I was back on 7 species,
Oh,
of which might be the most
right. But fig trees, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I refuse to answer, Your Honor. All right. But the point is, again, yes, the plagues. It's the curses that you will find in Deuteronomy, and in to the same degree at the end of Leviticus, but the next line it comes out very clearly, right? V'shilachti bachem dever b'derech Mitzrayim, and I will send you pestilence in the manner of Egypt, right? Now it goes on, v'haragti b'cherev b'chorechem im shvi suseichem. I slew your young men with the sword together with your captured horses. Now what strikes me here very interesting, and since he mentioned Egypt, Bachurechem sounds like, but this is a stretch, guys.
Yeah, the firstborn of the
firstborn, Bechorotechem, right?
Right.
Then HaBechor. Now that's spelled with a chaf, not a chet.
Right.
But it makes you think of the firstborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And dever is a disease of animals, and now you have horses. So it just struck me as being very interesting that you got Egypt, something that sounds like firstborns, and four-legged animals. All right.
Right.
So anyway, then they died. Excuse me. Be'esh machanechem uva apchem, and I shall cause to go up in smoke your camps, your encampments, and your noses. In other words, and you're going to smell it. I think that's what he's getting at here. It says here, in your very nostrils.
Mm.
Again, you didn't turn back to me. Lo shavta madai. You see the method here? Repeating and repeating. And so you can see the picture that he's creating. I'm giving you warnings. This is, each time this happens, you should be stopping and thinking, why is he doing this to us? Okay, and maybe search your ways. Doesn't seem to work. They're stubborn and they're evil. Okay? All right. Now, the interesting thing, though, the reference to Egypt for a moment, let's pause. Egypt, was a country with a lot of history in Eretz Israel. I mean, for the bulk of the biblical period, there's not that much. But in the early biblical and pre-biblical period, Egypt was a major force in Canaan and beyond. And there was, we were talking about the presence, the importance of that piece of land. We were talking about it from the Persian perspective, right? Being on the southern side of their empire. But prior to that, the Egyptians, when they were in their heyday, they were concerned about the powers in Mesopotamia. All right? And these are the earlier empires, powerful people. Okay? And so they wanted to maintain this barrier that would go from outside of Egypt, from the Sinai obviously is a barrier, but then beyond that, even in the populated areas of Canaan and the other side of the Jordan, all the way up, and then beyond into what was part of the Syrian or pre-Syrian, these empires up there. And so they would send people up Ramses II, whom some people think may be the Pharaoh of Exodus. I mean, it's interesting because he was the first Pharaoh with that name who actually began to use it in the construction of cities. And he built a new capital for himself, very close to Goshen. Okay, he built a new capital up there. The reason it is said why is because it's close to the Derech Hayam, to the coastal route. So when he needed to send troops up, boom, right away, he would have garrisons nearby to guard him and so forth, but he would keep an eye on the army, and if he needed to send them up into Egypt, he could do it because he wanted to maintain control. And the fact is, the Egyptians had control over Canaan and the area around there pretty much from the 1400s down to 1150. Okay, and they found Egyptian stuff from that period in Hatzor in the north.
Yeah.
Article about that one too.
I think BAR has something about that too.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah.
And so and there are elements of worship of pagan gods
What did I do?
in the north and in the south of Israel. I mean, in other words, there were Egyptians worshiping their gods there. So, I mean, their impact was not minimal. But then in 1210 or thereabout, 1209, 1208, whatever it was, I think it was 1208 actually, Merneptah, one of the sons of Ramses II, his son goes in and he conquers land in Eretz Yisrael when Solomon ruled. And his name is mentioned. It's the name, no, Merneptah. This is not Solomon. Sorry. No. 1210. This is the Merneptah Stele. We've spoken about it. It is the one place where we learn the name Israel. The first reference outside of biblical sources that refers to Israel is the Merneptah Stele, found in the southern part in the desert. But it's there, and it is found. I'm not sure where exactly it was found, but what's on it is important. It says regarding Israel, its seed has been destroyed. Israel is no more. Okay, and it does not refer to any geographic area. All the other references are cities in the area that they took, that he conquered in 1208. All right, but this is Canaan. But there's a mention there. In other words, there was a group of people there in the late 13th century BCE. Remember, the dates get smaller, right? So we're talking 1208 or thereabouts. There were a group of people, a nation, a defined element of people called Israel. Yep.
Wow.
There it is. Yep. Okay. And we don't know a heck about them. This is the period, the period of the Shoftim. Okay. Which we really, other than the stories that are in the book of Sefer Shoftim, this is that period. But there's no mention there of Egyptians. But that was localized stuff. Inter-tribe, well, there are other nations, these other little nations around. So this is squabbling among them. But this was a period of basically of Egyptian control. So there you go. But also, Sheshonq was the king of Egypt during the reign of King Solomon. And there's in the book of Kings, there's a reference to Sheshach. They misspelled it, but that's the guy. He came into and he conquered land from Solomon for a while, but apparently he left. So, I mean, it was not a long-term thing, but they're still interested down there. Eventually, it ended. The Philistines became a big problem for the Egyptians. When they were a very dominant force from 1150 till about 1,000, till David came in and began putting them in their place. And that process continued slowly over time. But the Philistines never gained control of areas after David as much as they had beforehand. And basically they were limited to their cities on the coast from David on. But they were still there. Well, Amos refers to them. Right? Remember, we had that already. Right? He referred to Ashdod. And there were Philistines still there. And this is 750. So, but the point is they lost their power. All right, but my point, what I'm getting at, is the culture, the history of the early biblical period. Egypt was more than just a place that enslaved their ancestors. Egypt was also a country in which Israelites lived under their yoke one time or another. So they're an enemy, and yet here he is, basically associating Israel with the punishments of Egypt. It's a shtoch, he's giving him a zetz. Okay. All right, moving on. What time is it? We started 10 minutes late.
8:40.
We still got time. It's 20 minutes to 9. We still got time. Good. I want to move on. All right. Then, all right. Oh, yes, there's one other, this notion of comparing Israelites with some other nasty people. All right, we already saw hints of that with the fact that Judah is put in the same category as all those other nations at the beginning of the book. Remember? Judah is the last of those 7 nations mentioned whom God was going to punish because they did bad things. And then it's Israel was the next one. All right, but so God, Amos' style is to associate Israel with other people that God punished or will punish. Okay, so that's part of his approach. But the most interesting one, getting back to Egypt, is in chapter 9, verse 7. Do you have your Bible? If you do, look in Amos chapter 9, verse 7. This is again very surprising. What does it say?
Hello, Ivnei Kushim Atem Li Bnei Yisrael Neum Adonai.
Right. So you are to me like the Cushites. Some people assume that may be the Ethiopians, who were a power in Africa, south of Egypt, one of the thorns in Egypt's sides for hundreds of years. All right, so that could be one. We're not sure. The English translation I have as Cushites, because I'm not sure exactly what it is. It could be Ethiopia. But then go on. Halo et Yisrael he'eleti mi eretz Mitzrayim. Yes, indeed. I took Israel out of Egypt, but I also took Uflishtim mi Kaftor. Okay, and I took Philistines out of Kaftor, and I took our Arameans out of Kir. So whoopee-doo on with the Exodus. Israel's not the only one. Do you think you're super special because I took you out of Egypt? No. I've taken other nations out. You're not so big. He's spitting in their face. I mean, he's debunking the central historical moment in the Bible. This Amos guy's got chutzpah. Well, it's in the last chapter.
Rabbi, where is Kaftor?
Cyprus, I think.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah, Tybal.
I was going to ask where that was, but also Aram, as in Aramean, as in my father was a wandering Aramean?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that up north in the Babylonian area. Remember, Aram was already mentioned as a nation that Israel had to deal with. Yes, they were a strong nation, and they came in the earlier part of the kingdom. They came in and conquered our lands and had to be kicked out at different times. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the Arameans, right. All right, but now not the pièce de résistance. But you want to talk about the very worst analogy? Look at the next one. Verse 11. Hafachti vachem kema'apechat Elohim et Sodom vet Amorah. I have wrought destruction. I have turned you over. Lahafoch, right? Okay, like kafe hafuch, right? It's turned over, right? I overturned you like I overturned Sodom and Amorah. Can you think of any worse people than Sodom and Amorah? I mean, these were people who were utterly destroyed. I mean, these other nations existed, okay? These other nations existed. And God even helped them out, he says, right? So the Israelites don't get big heads out of the fact that I took you out of Egypt. But now he's comparing them with the lowest of the low, whom God destroyed with horrific fire and brimstone. Oh my God, horrible, horrible stuff. And it wasn't just that the cities were destroyed, but all the people were destroyed. And Abraham couldn't find with God 10 righteous people to save the city in it. Remember all that. That's when Abraham bargains with God, because Lot's living there, right? And then Lot leaves, etc., etc. He escapes. All right, so he's really, literally scraping the bottom here, intentionally. Horrific. That's what you guys are, right? And you are going to be you ke'ud mutzal misrefa. You become like a brand, a small, tiny burned bush plucked from the burning. That's all you are. Because it was fire, right, that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Amorah. All right, but again, and what is this what's he talking about here? This is something God did to them. What's he talking about? Is Amos exaggerating here? Okay, but you got to keep in mind and you're going to hear something later on that relates to this to a certain degree. Again, and you have not turned back to me. Lo shaftem. All right, so when you think about these horrible destruction, such horrible destruction, you have to keep in mind that Amos is writing this looking back on 250 years of Israelite history, right? I mean, of monarchy and being sort of a real nation state in one form or multi-nation state with Judah. And you got to think back, and there were situations in the course of the history to that point where towns were totally destroyed. I mean, if you go back and read the Bible, in the Book of Kings and Chronicles as well, you'll see these wars that were constantly being waged in and out of the country. And the wars included destructions of cities. And so this notion of cities destroyed and large numbers of people killed, it's possible, that Amos is not simply exaggerating. What he may be doing is sort of pulling together the sense of the suffering that the Israelites experienced when these enemies would come in and destroy. That's the only thing I can think of. Or he's just plain exaggerating. But again, he said, God says, this is what I did to you. I destroyed your cities. I've done that. He says, I've destroyed your cities the way I destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It already happened. And it's very possible. I mean, this is before, for example, the Assyrians came down in 700 and literally destroyed Lachish, big city in the south, destroyed it. We talked about that. You can see the soldiers in the British Museum on the wall, the relief from the palace, the Assyrian palace. Okay, so that's what's going on here.
Can we see it as a warning for the future?
Well, that's the point.
That is the point, yeah.
No, I mean, but
Exactly the point.
No, these events were not happened, but they are warning for events.
No, he's saying these are things, they happened.
They did happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way, yes, Amos is presenting this. And the point is, in each instance, you didn't change your ways. You didn't return to God. In other words, God lays out a series of serious sufferings, right? Disease, right? And destruction. And the whole point is, I'm doing this to show you my power and to show you, I'm warning you. As bad as these were, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, he's, in other words, he's reinterpreting the realities and maybe exaggerating a bit for effect.
Right.
But he's interpreting realities with which the people are aware and saying, by now you should have realized what God is telling you.
Yeah.
But you're stubborn. And there were prophets before him, right, who came along. I mean, Elijah is the best example, 100 years earlier, right, with the Baal. Okay, I mean, that was horrific. Okay, and the fact is, Baal, he had Eliyahu was told by God, go and get one of these other kings and tell him to come and punish Achav. And he did, and Achav died in battle. Ahab. And that was after the theophany on Mount Sinai, right, where Eliyahu, you know the story, right? Eliyahu runs to the desert, goes onto Mount Sinai, has a vision with God, etc., etc. And in the end, he yells at God twice at the beginning, and he says, why are you killing the prophets? We're here for you. Great, powerful argument. Before and after these things, God said, shut up, I got a job for you to do. Go, tell the king over there, across the river, Dorton yonder, tell him, you come, God will be with you, and you'll punish this king. It happened. All right, so, I mean, but again, he doesn't refer to this specifically, but these instances of divine presence, being interpreted in the biblical tradition as a punishment for evil that the people do, anybody who's smart should be able to figure things out. Okay, that's what he's saying. And it's not over. Okay, time. Let's see. We are. Oh, good. I still have 15 minutes. That's fantastic. But now he says, wait a second. Look at the next verse, though. He's continuing. Lachen ko e'aseh lecha Yisrael. This, listen, guys, assuredly, this is how I'm going to act toward you. I'm telling you this now. Okay, and Ekev kizot eselach, and because this is what I'm going to do to you, hikon likrat Elohecha Yisrael, prepare to meet your God. Okay, plain and simple. It's almost as if he's saying, this is what's going to happen, because you've proven your stubbornness. I tried to change you. I couldn't. And so now, who is this God? He says, right, meet your God. All right, so now we have what is called, in verse 13, a doxology. It's a formal statement of God's power. And this is a very interesting passage, okay? It's a poem, all right? And you will see that it has within it elements that remind you of something else. It's a chiasm, which I will show to you, all right? And these doxologies are found from time to time throughout the Bible. And there are two others in the book of Amos, one in chapter 5, which we'll come upon next time we meet, and hopefully, and one in chapter 9 toward the end again. Okay, it's a statement and it's a structured thing. You can tell them by how they express themselves. All right, so here's what it is. So you meet your maker. So now God, Amos is going to use this doxology to present the maker to God. Okay, so this is who in case you forgot, this is who we're talking about. Now listen closely to the Hebrew here. It's very interesting. Yotzer harim uvorei ruach, magid la'adam mashecho, oseh shachar ve'efa, v'dorech al bamatei aretz. Adonai Elohei tzvaot shmo. Okay, this is Amos talking. So who is God? Yotzer harim uvorei ruach. What does that sound like?
Some of the prayers that we say.
Yotzer or uvorei.
Moshe.
Right.
Right? Isn't that interesting? And then, so it says Yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei hakol, or ra.
Exactly.
Look beyond. So magid la'adam ma'asecho. I'll explain that to you in a minute.
The end of Dad, no wonder I get.
But then it says, look, oseh shachar efa. So you have Yotzer, Borei, Oseh. So three, in other words, so when the prophet Isaiah, speaking for God, says, who am I? Yotzer or uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei ra. That's what it is in Isaiah 45:7. You'll have this embedded, emblazoned in your mind by the time we finish. Isaiah 45:7. Okay, that's a form of doxology. Then God is saying it about himself. This is who I am. You identifying God. All right. So, well, let's say what this is talking about. So, God is Yotzer Harim Uvorei Ruach.
Wait, no, I'm.
Verse 13. Verse 13.
Verse 13.
Yes, that's what I read in Amos, chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Oh,
4. Where we were before.
Okay, that's what got me mixed up. Okay.
You all right? You there? All right.
Yeah,
So Yotzer Harim Uvorei
Yeah.
Ruach. Okay. So God is he's the shaper or the creator of hills and mountains, and the creator of the wind. So Harim deals with what? That's the earth. The wind, where does the wind operate?
From the sky.
Yeah, it's heaven, right? The sky. Mm-hmm. Then he has a statement, Umagid la'adam mashecho, and he tells humans what is his shecho. I'll get to that word in a minute. It has to do with talking. All right? Secho, I'm sorry, not shecho. Repeat, I'll correct that. Secho. It's a sin. Okay? It's a sin. Secho. But he tells people sort of where his mind is. Then what does it say? It flips back now to the making of things. Oseh shachar efa, right? I make the morning to replace the darkness, the light of the morning, the shachar, right? In place of the efa, which is the darkness of night. So that's like, right, light replacing darkness. V'dorech al bamatei eretz. I walk on the high places of the earth. So now look, Oseh shachar efa.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that deal? That's not the earth he's talking about here, right? He says, I bring the morning light in lieu of the darkness. Where's that again? That's in the heavens, right? That's heavenly, not earthly. Dorech al bamatei aretz, though, he means he walks on the hills, on the high places on the land. That's back to the earth, right? Now let's look again. Yotzer Harim, right? Do you see where is there a parallel with Yotzer Harim? I make mountains. What's the parallel in what we just read?
Bamatei aretz.
Dorei bamatei aretz, exactly. All right, keep that in mind. Then it says Borei Ruach. That's heaven. What's the parallel? Tybal.
I was going to ask a different thing.
Oh, no. Stick with this.
Yeah.
I mean, my hand was up from before, but the parallel for the wind, is it the high places?
No, Oseh Shachar, Efa, heaven. The high places are high places on earth. That's parallel to Harim, high places on earth. The Ruach is the wind. That's heavenly. Shachar and Efa darkness and light, light and darkness, that's heavenly. So you see, it's A, B, B, A.
Right.
Both Harim and Bamatei Aretz are the A's, and Shachar and Ruach are the B's.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a chiasm, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it has a middle,
Mm-hmm.
which is not repeated. Magid la'adam masecho. He tells humans what is his sech.
Siach. Isn't that siach?
Well, it's close to, yes, it's close. So I checked that word. First of all, this is once again, our old friend Hapax Legomenon is here. Again, what is a Hapax?
Is that the one time only?
The one-time word. Exactly. Secho, that verb, that word, it's a noun, is only found right here.
Mm.
And it's a variant of siach, talking. However, what's it talking referring to? So one interpretation, which is in the Kerler-Baumgartner, means God's plan. He reveals to him God's plan. But in the concordance, the word siach, which is the other version of this, or the basic version of this, is used to be, he says, hold on, I got to get to the full word here. So, hitpashchut hanefesh. What does hitpashchut hanefesh mean? It means a pouring out of his soul. I like that.
Mm.
I think that that's what this is saying. God pours out his soul to humans. That's why he created humans.
Yeah, when he created it, didn't he puff did he nasham באדם ונתן את נפשו, לא? וגם כשהוא ברא את האדם, when Hashem created human, he breathed into him
they're right. That's the breath of life.
Breath of life, yes.
Right.
But would it be very parallel to that?
Now this is, I would say it's closer to Tselem Elohim of the first chapter.
Tselem, nice.
Vayivra Elohim et Adam b'Tsalmo, b'Tselem Elohim bara oto, Zachar nekeva bara otam.
Yeah.
Right. So I think more the Tselem thing. And there's a big discussion in the rabbis talk about it, philosophers, why did God create? And specifically, why did he create people if he knew they'd be such a pain in the neck? All right, so the answer that this moves in that direction. He wanted somebody with whom he could pour out his soul. But it means that God does that to the people. And what you just read was a pouring out of God's soul in a negative way. He is so angry at this people, he just poured out his soul to them, what we just read, including punishments. And he said, this is it. I give up. You guys are goners. I just want you to know, I'm telling you, I warned you. I tried to do everything I could. But guys, you blew it.
Yeah.
I think that's what this is alluding to. That's why it's there. That's my opinion. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, Tybal.
So, beginner Hebrew here. The Bamatai, what is the
Bama, a high place.
No, I know what a Bama is, a high place, but I don't know what that suffix is doing. Does that make it possessive?
No, bamote, it means it's a construct female plural.
But I was expecting Bamos, but
bamote, it is.
It's
but it doesn't mean that it's somehow possessive.
Bamote, the mem, it's a
possessive.
Sataf kamatz, which is pronounced o. So it's the same as bamote. Bamot, plural.
Yeah, it's a plural. Yeah, it's a plural. So it's bamote.
And the yud, the te, that ending, the a, the tsere with the yud is of.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right, the bamot of the land.
Right.
God walks on the high places of the land. Now that's really interesting because that's where the prophets casting at Israel for building, Jeremiah in particularly, on all the Bamot is where they have these shrines.
Oh, yeah.
And they're called Bamot. With the pagan, with the standing stones and the Asherim and all these other stuff that are pagan things. By the way, I just want you to know, I read an article recently, just today, I was reading an article that they've discovered places all over the country where they had Bamot. And from ancient times, in fact, they found Bamot that go back to 7,000 BCE.
Wow.
In Israel.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that as a form of, idolatry, if you will, and they seem to be because they appear in places that appear to be worship places. They go back thousands of years, and they continue down to the time of these guys. Okay, that's how deeply rooted that kind of idolatry was. And as again, you go down to Arad, that went up around sometime after 800 BC, and it probably was destroyed by the Babylonians. Okay, but I mean, all right. Anyhow, so it's interesting because this is a praise of God, but I think almost nuanced it in this subtle way of telling this is the God you got to deal with. Okay, this is this God, and he calls it like he says it. He does not deceive. He tells you right away what's up, and you better listen. And if it's too late, it's too late. That's the way it is. And he's now the last line. Adonai Elohei Tzvaot Shemo. His name is Adonai Elohei Tzvaot. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, the God of the Tzvaot. What are the Tzvaot?
Yeah, hosts, God of hosts. I mean,
what hosts?
I mean, a lot.
Heavenly ones.
Heavenly ones, more than likely. What are the heavenly hosts? Who does it include?
Angels.
The angels, right?
And the sun and the moon and the stars.
Oh.
All the created stuff up there. Right? And God is the creator of all of that. So he's saying, you guys, you are dealing with the boss of the cosmos. You think you can get away with anything? This is what he's saying. Look what he saves for the end. No, you ain't getting away with nothing. Powerful. I love it. Powerful stuff. What a creative mind. What a creative mind.
I'm surprised they didn't put it in Shmoneh Esrei or not Tefillah.
Say again?
I'm surprised that particular Pasuk 13 was not inserted into our prayer books.
Oh, yes. No, that's interesting because it can be associated with something positive too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? God shares with us everything, so we can share it with him. Yeah, that's very interesting thought. Yeah.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.